It's an interesting story of great relevance with the recent developments in Gaza. It ended because President Obama was
Guys
going
do
to
it
be
now?
inaugurated
Okay.
president. And he didn't want this sideshow in Gaza to distract attention from his coronation. And so he told Israel, end the attack. And it did. Very obediently, it did as the master ordered them being Israel, to do. In the current situation, as you will recall, about a month ago, um, President Trump announced that if the hostages were not released at the time of his inauguration, there would be all hell to pay. Now, Trump, President Trump, he didn't want to begin his presidency by having to unleash a savage assault on Gaza. First of all, because the people of Gaza had already paid hell in the past 15 months. So there wasn't much more that he could do. And secondly, because he didn't want to begin his presidency on such a merciless, heartless note. And so he read the Riot Act, or his emissary read the Riot Act to Netanyahu, as in sign the agreement which apparently doesn't differ in any significant way from the agreement that was agreed to in May of this past year. And it ended. The lesson to be learned from there is when an American president says stop, it stops. All this talk about Americans having no power, that Netanyahu doesn't listen, that and so on, it's just nonsense.
And I thought that was the first thing that was really important to react to because it places the onus, I think, much more correctly, not at the feet of Donald Trump being this tremendous negotiator. No, it's not Donald Trump's art of the deal. It's the fact that he decided to utilize the power of the presidency out of nothing but hubris, really, to prevent himself from being embarrassed on inauguration day, to prevent himself from looking weak or under the boot of Netanyahu. And instead, like Barack Obama did, as a show of power for cheap popularity, he said, not during my inauguration, right? Now, as Donald Trump continues to allow Jared Kushner to run large parts of his enterprise, and as he continues to staff his cabinet with neocons and expansionists and evangelicals, we understand he is going to continue to allow Benjamin Netanyahu to accomplish his goals. But he wanted to have a reprieve in fighting because there was nothing of note that he could do to contribute any further to the destruction of Gaza. So then he felt the only thing that he could do to get a political win was to say no more. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. And obviously we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, I don't think that Miriam Adelson would have had a, great seat at Trump's inauguration after donating as much as she did if she wasn't going to get exactly what she wants, which is the continued expansion of the Israeli territories into the West Bank and the continuation of this genocide. It's completely obvious. And even if you look in Israel and see the sort of pressures that Netanyahu is under, he's not even the most insane person within the war cabinet. There's people to his right that are saying they're going to resign from Netanyahu's administration if the war doesn't resume in, I think, 60 days. So, I mean, these are the pressures that are actually afoot within the Israeli government. The people of Israel are bloodthirsty for more war. They want the, conquest of Palestine to be complete. And it will most likely be completed under Donald Trump's administration. We can't lose sight of that because of the temporary reprieve and suffering, which is incredibly welcome, right? I think that that's amazing. I hope that people are able to escape with their lives. I hope they're able to restore some level of, vitality to their probably emaciated bodies. This is horrific stuff. Any reprieve is great. And if any lives are saved thanks to this reprieve, then that's a good thing. But let's not get it twisted, guys. We're not going to see the glorious return of Palestine, under Donald Trump. It's not like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I hate to say it.
Yes, and before this, I cut it down a little bit because, as chat pointed out a few times, sometimes our audience struggles with the cadence of Professor Finkelstein. He's very well read and very careful with his wording. He says what he means, but he says it slowly sometimes. So what you missed is his setup to that is him talking about how he hasn't much paid attention to the specifics of this agreement. Obviously Norm Finkelstein is supportive of the ceasefire, however it would emerge, but he talks about how he hasn't really spent a lot of time following this closely. And then he gives the example of what happened with Barack Obama and says it's all for show, right? What will really be illustrative of Trump's policy will come at the end of this 43 days. We've already seen him allow, really, and it's crazy too, because now Trump is president, so it will actually be on him to legislate and govern and do diplomacy and not just talk from the sidelines, essentially. So I think it's important to continue to put the pressure on him, but the reality is he's going to go in, and what they're going to start doing is the actual forcible, like, I wouldn't imagine. It sounds so horrible to say, guys. I'm hoping that obviously I'm totally wrong, and this is not what happens, but it seems very likely to me that what's going to happen is they're going to push the Palestinian population further and further south, and they're going to expand the occupied territories into what was once Gaza, and they are going to start to rebuild what was once Gaza, and they're going to put Israeli settlers there, and that is going to happen in mass under the Donald Trump presidency, while he simultaneously takes credit for ending the war as it goes to a more quiet note now that they've already killed some 50,000 individuals and displaced hundreds of thousands more from their homes.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I'm just wary of giving Trump too much credit, because I feel like if too many people give too much credit to Trump, and it will create this illusion that the war is over and that Trump ended the war. And then when the war resumes, and when that colonialist enterprise resumes in a horrific and insanely imperialistic fashion, not that long from now, people are just gonna not be talking about it, because in their mind, oh yeah, the war's over, everything's fine now, when in reality, absolutely, the horror will continue. It might get even worse. And I guess the only silver lining is the mask has been ripped off Israel, and that was a big part of the reason why Hamas did October 7th in the first place, because they knew that the response would be savage, and they knew the response would be vicious and unforgivable in the eyes of anyone with a fucking conscience, in the eyes of anyone with a soul. And that is true. Israel's mask has been ripped right off. There's no more pretending that, oh, this is, this peaceful country of Jews just trying to pretend themselves. No, they're genocidal lunatics. They're genocidal monsters, and the world now sees them for what they are, at least most of the world. And again, that's the only silver lining in all of this.
Yeah, I think you're totally right to point out that people will go back to business as usual, unfortunately, and just look at our own country, right? Let's look at our own very recent history. We are still actively occupying the independent sovereign nation of Iraq. We have been responsible for the death of 1 million Iraqis over the course of my lifetime. Nobody talks about it. In fact, I see a lot of people have the gall and audacity to try and say even George Bush wasn't as bad as Joe Biden, which is absolutely the worst, dumbest, most fucking foolish take I've ever heard in my entire life, because what you're doing is you are forgetting so much horror that George W. Bush imposed. And that is not to launder the reputation of Joe Biden, but look at his fucking domestic policy. It was a goddamn picnic compared to the Patriot Act. He didn't spy on Muslims domestically in all fucking 50 states. Okay.
And one of the only good things Biden did do was ending the fucking Afghanistan war.
Exactly. So either way, we cannot lose sight of the fact that our country is as evil and as willing to do terrible, atrocious things as Israel. And we have, as a nation, effectively forgotten a lot of it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, Israel is, I mean, it basically is part of this country.
Exactly.
It's the 51st state. And in fact, it's more than the 51st state. We give it more fucking money than we give our own states. They have healthcare and we don't. So anyway,